This episode brought to you by How to Write Manga, your complete guide to the secrets of Japanese comic book storytelling. Available wherever fine ebooks are sold.
The world has gone insane. Cosplayers rule the conventions. Gamers dominate the tabletop and the internet. Sci-fi subjugates the movies, and fantasy rules the bookstore with an iron fist. Only one group can bring order to this unruly mob. A team of uber geeks, masters of the nerdly arts, trained for decades in the hobby shops and basements of the nation. Mobilized by the secret masters, they are the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
So, 1,
2,
3,
4,
5,
6,
7,
8,
9,
10.
Hello, and welcome to the Department of Nerdly Affairs. I'm your host, Rob Patterson, here with my co-host, Don Chisholm.
Woo.
And tonight, we're going to get Ultra, as in Ultraman. We're going to talk about the legendary Japanese superhero Ultraman, who many would liken to being Japan's equivalent to Superman. And I think the best way to start is to talk about Ultraman's history. So, Don, where did Ultraman come from?
Ultraman's one of them weird things. It was produced by Tsuburaya Productions. What they had originally done is they were a lot of the people that worked on that show and that were the people who did the effects for the original Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
So they had experience doing the model work and doing the big giant monsters. Prior to that, they actually did, like, around the World War II era, they did war films. And they would film these big fight scenes, like, with giant battleships and stuff. So that was, again, how they got their start into the miniature work.
Mm-hmm.
After Godzilla, there was, as I recall, there was an opening for a TV series on TBS in Japan.
TBS being Tokyo Broadcast System, not Turner Broadcast System, which is what most Americans would be familiar with.
At least not yet.
Dun, dun, dun.
So they decided they wanted to do an effects show.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of back and forth over what to do, and the first one they did was a show called Ultra Q. And it was black and white. It was I've seen it compared to stuff like The Outer Limits.
Question, what year was this?
What year? It was it 63 or 64?
Yes, I think that's about right.
Yeah, it was really early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same time as The Outer Limits here. And again, for anybody who isn't familiar with the original Outer Limits, it was the Twilight Zone with more of a focus on the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
That every episode featured a new weird alien or weird dimensional monster or something.
Well, yeah, everything was connected to aliens in one way or another with the Outer Limits. Kind of like Doctor Who, actually.
Yeah, that's another good example. Ultra Q was the same way. It was each episode was built around the idea of whatever the monster of the episode was.
Mm-hmm.
And they mixed it up pretty good. They did, there's comedy episodes. There's, straight up, horror and suspense episodes. There's twist ending episodes. They did one, it's essentially a kid's episode. It's a fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
About, the ocean princess, and she's this little girl that's essentially tormenting this poor, 9-year-old kid. And drags him on this crazy adventure where he's chased by a dragon, and in the end she gives him a box and says, and it'll bring you luck, but don't open it. He opens it and it turns him into a little old man, and everybody laughs at him.
Wow, that's messed up.
It is, because that's basically where it ends. And it was very surreal.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of what they were doing is there was a lot of experimenting, especially because the effects show and the suit effects were still fairly new, and Tsuburaya Productions was trying to see what they could do with it, and they were trying to see where you could go with a show like this, I think, and that's why you saw this big variety.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't all just straight up fight those monsters.
Well, just to backtrack a tiny bit, if I remember right, the premise of Ultra Q, wasn't it that there was a couple of newspaper reporters and they
Yep.
went and investigated like weird stuff all across Japan. And
Mhm.
inevitably these weird stuff would include monsters of one kind or another.
Yeah, that's kind of the basic premise that binds the show.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there were a fair number of episodes that didn't really fit that.
Well, obviously
Like
the fairy tale one you just described can't have included the newspaper reporter, can it?
yeah, as I recall, it's been a little bit since I've watched them. Yeah, it was literally just the story with this kid.
Hmm.
Same thing with Canagon. Canagon is one of those monsters that everybody's seen, but nobody knows where it's from.
Right.
And that was just
Describe Canagon for our listeners.
oh, he's the one. It looks like a picture, kind of a generic lizard kaiju body
Mm-hmm.
with a big clam head with two little eye stalks, and he's got a zipper for a mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he's supposed to be like a walking change purse.
Right.
And because the idea of the episode is it's these kids that used to hang around in this like a garbage dump,
Mm-hmm.
scavenging like useful stuff or stuff they could sell in that, which is weird because for some reason, back in the day, like in my parents' generation,
Mm-hmm.
apparently that was where kids hung out, because I can think of so many shows from back in the day that featured kids hanging out in garbage dumps.
Wow. Okay. Well, in a weird way, I guess that makes sense because at that point, vacant lots and spaces were generally used to dump garbage in.
Makes sense.
And so what they were really doing is they were hanging out in the spaces because remember there was so much construction going on all the time.
Right.
And so that's sadly what they were using. Yeah, that would make sense. That's sadly what was being used for sorry, the open spaces were probably mostly being used for garbage. And so therefore kids hang out in garbage dumps. Temporary garbage dumps we'll call them.
Okay, makes sense. And then, yeah, that was the episode, and they find this, it's a cocoon,
Mm-hmm.
and the one little greedy kid takes it because he shakes it, and it sounds like there's money in it,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets cursed, and he turns into Canagon, which is this big monster that he has to eat money or he'll die.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, in the end, he doesn't learn any kind of lesson at all from it, and the main reporters weren't in that episode at all either.
Mm-hmm. So they just use the reporters just sometimes as a kind of structure element.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, thinking back, if when they pitched the show to the network, that's what they said it was.
Mm-hmm.
That, no, it's about these people that investigate weirdness. And then these other episodes were things they threw in for their own sake because they just thought this would be cool, or they wanted to test, would this make a viable episode? And they just kind of slipped them in.
Right. Okay. I can see that. Okay, so how do we transition then from Ultra Q, which is just people encountering weirdness, to Ultraman?
Well, Ultraman, it looks like what had happened. Again, I gotta say, it's kind of tough to get info on some of this stuff, like the specific nuts and bolts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it's the other side of the planet, and it's pretty old, and back in the day, people didn't necessarily fret over production details like this, like not the audience.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I know and what it looks like is Ultra Q was really popular, and they were offered another series. And this one they wanted to do something a little more solid, and they decided it went through a bunch of the original Ultraman was what eventually happened. It went through a few different versions. Because there was one I believe was called Woo.
Yes. Wait, I thought Woo was the original title for Ultra Q.
No, the original title for Ultra Q was I believe it was Unbalance.
Yes. Okay. Yes, you're right. Yeah, Unbalance. Yep, you're right.
Because in the 70s they did a show that was called Unbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a horror show, and it was kind of a similar sort of idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Ultra Q, it was Unbalance, and then it was Ultra Question.
Yes.
And that's where the Q comes from, that it sounded more slick.
Oh, I remember reading somewhere that actually, what was it? It was actually the result of the Olympics.
Oh,
They
yeah.
held the Olympics in Japan, and some Olympian did a maneuver that was the something Q or something like that. And that became like a buzzword to call this Q thing.
Right.
Here it is. Okay. It was because the gold medal winning Japanese gymnast during the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo, who used a technique called the Ultra C. Oh, there it
Yeah.
is, Ultra C, which caused the word to become a catchphrase. So Ultra C, but was the maneuver, and so they changed it to Ultra Q. Well, there we go.
There we go. That works.
All right. And yes, I did a quick check. You're right. Wu was one of the original names. Although Wu was apparently going to end up being kind of this almost Doctor Who-ish story, according to Wikipedia anyway, where it was a space creature that befriends a reporter, and they go around like investigating weird stuff, from the sounds of it.
Yeah, and he was going to be not like an actual monster. He's going to be kind of like the weird sidekick sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was another one. I think it was early 2000s. They did do a movie in Japan that was called Wu.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of that idea, and it's sort of like E.T. Where Wu is this little cutesy little white thing with the big giant doe eyes, kind of.
Well, according to this, Super Eye Productions would ultimately produce a series dubbed Bioplanet Wu in January 2006, but it's only very loosely based on the original concept.
Okay, yeah, I've only ever seen it referred to just as Wu.
Yeah, it was called Bioplanet Wu, but again, it was very loosely based on some of the old notes or idea.
Yeah.
And then, according to this, they came up with another name called Bemlar. It was supposed to be Scientific Special Search Party Bemlar. Mm-hmm. Which was effectively Ultraman in a lot of ways. Except that Bemlar was a giant bird-like humanoid monster.
Yeah. Who
defends Earth from aliens and other things. And Bemlar apparently looked a lot like Gappa, the Triphibian monster.
Yeah, I've seen sketches of what I think was the original design. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was the idea. They scrapped it because they were having a hard time telling who was the good guy and who was the bad guy.
Yep, that would be it. Yeah. And the final one was actually, before it became Ultraman, was apparently called Red Man.
Yeah.
Or Red Doman.
Yeah, if you look up, I think that one was, for a lot of their earlier production, that was the name, because a lot of people know that one. Mm-hmm. To the point that if you've ever watched like a Japanese cartoon or movie or that, where somebody, for whatever reason, is on like a movie set where they're filming like an action show, or they're filming like a Sentai show, it seems like Red Man is what they always call it.
Just as an in-joke. Oh, I never knew that. Okay, but yeah, you're right when I think about it, yeah.
Yeah, because there's there's like one of the first season Sailor Moon episodes. Mm-hmm. They're fighting like a Sentai monster, and it was called Red Man.
Right.
And I think it was when they did the Detroit Metal City movie. Mm-hmm. I think in that when they're on like the TV set, I think that show was called Red Man.
Well, it's one of those ones that I think, maybe out of a tribute, has just never been used, I think, as a Sentai series name, or Tokusatsu series name. And so as an end result, it's one that's always available, and no one's really got the copyright on it. At least I don't think there was a Red Man. I don't think there was. But again, because you've seen so many references to it, it's hard to be sure.
Yeah, and I think it became one of those weird in-jokes like we have here in North America. What is it? If somebody's taking a plane anywhere, it's oceanic.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That was the one they used in Lost. But if you watch like a lot of shows, because that's just kind of like a placeholder for we need a rights-free airline to use just for this shot.
Yeah, and so it's always Oceanic Airlines or something.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and apparently Red Man got canned because he was Ultraman-like, but he was very demonic-looking, because he was more of a monster.
Yeah, he kind of... Oh, go ahead.
You've actually seen pictures of him?
Again, it's one of those things, because I've got a lot of got a lot of like books on stuff like this, and if you get American books on the old, like, say, Japanese shows, they'll have pictures of things that are just like somebody saved them from the garbage bin when the studio was moving on, or that, and you'll see things that they're sort of, people think, oh, this might have been from this show, it's just something that the studio was going to ditch. And I've seen shots, if it's the one I'm thinking, the original, and don't hold me to this, the original Redman kind of looked a little more like Ultraman Taro. Because he had those curved horns on the side and that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because the way they describe him, that sounds like Ultraman Taro, but we'll get to Taro later.
Yeah.
Okay, so they went through a bunch of them, and eventually they settled on the idea of a superhero who is actually an alien pretending to be a human, or in the case of Ultraman, merged with a human, who is part of a group called the Science Patrol, who goes out and investigates, the Science Special Search Party.
Yeah.
At least I think that's what they were called in Japanese, weren't they?
Yeah.
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 But in English, they're called the Science Patrol.
Yeah, because that's a big mouthful.
Yeah, exactly. And so he joins them when one of their members, Hayata, is nearly killed. Ultraman saves him and says, well, look, you can join with me, and you can use my powers to help fight, bad guys. And they join together. The only catch is Hayata can only become Ultraman for roughly 3 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And also, Ultraman is freaking huge.
Yeah, because that was, as I recall in the original one, they kind of portrayed Ultraman, who's one of the beings from the M78 Nebula, that they're kind of like cosmic police in the original story.
Well, isn't that something, though, that I think got retconned later on when they started adding other Ultramen, like when we get to Ultra 7 and such?
I think it got reinforced, because when we get to one of the later series, and we talked about this like last week, there's kind of a twist. But the original one, because in the original, Ultraman is chasing Bemlar, who's a monster that escaped from what they ended up later calling the Ultra Zone, which is kind of like an extra-dimensional monster prison kind of place. It's
the Phantom Zone from Superman.
Yeah, that's what I was. Except occasionally it comes in phase with our dimension. But they did make it clear that Ultraman was after Bemlar because he escaped. And again, it's been a little bit since I've seen him. You do get this idea that he's some kind of authority figure. You find that out later on when was it Ultra Zoffy shows up at the end of the original series to rescue Ultraman.
Right.
You do definitely get the impression he's a commanding officer, and he's got like extra rivets in that, so he looks more macho. Because that was the idea when he hit Hayata's ship. He actually killed Hayata. That he was dead, and that was why they had to change form, because they were sharing a life, and only one of them could basically use it at a time.
Okay, so only one of them could have this physical body at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
And that was at the end when, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the original Ultraman. Ultraman dies at the end. And, yeah, I know. And then, Zoffy shows up and rescues him and brings him back, and the last thing he does is he separates Hayata from him and gives him his life back.
Okay, so it's a happy ending in the end.
Yeah, eventually.
Eventually, yeah, but first he has to die.
Yeah, it takes a little getting there, but they do end on an upbeat note.
Well, okay, since we're going to go total spoiler here then, if he dies, how do they defeat Zeton? Is it the Science Patrol that actually defeats Zeton in the end?
Yeah, this is the one of the interesting things. And a couple years ago, when they put out the original series, they did make it available on DVD. And I was watching it because there's certain things that become tropes with any kind of story. And you remember that Ultraman had a a timer
Mm-hmm.
that he could only, like you said before, he could only exist on Earth for 3 minutes at a time.
Yeah, the color timer.
Yeah, and it would start blinking and beeping, and if it ever, should it ever go out, Ultraman will never rise again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things from Ultraman, people remember that like it happened every episode.
Oh, yeah.
Hayata losing the beta capsule, which he needed to change. People remember that happening every episode.
Mm-hmm.
The Science Patrol being, like, delightful but ineffective is something people remember from every episode.
Mm-hmm.
But those things actually didn't happen every episode.
Okay.
There were times the Science Patrol was actually useful, including the monster at the end, Zeton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Science Patrol take him out.
So the final monster is actually defeated by the humans, not Ultraman.
Yeah, because that was Ito invents. It's a little rocket that you stick in the end of the pistol,
Mm-hmm.
and then he hits Zeton and he blows up, and that was. And then you're thinking, how come you couldn't have done that 5 minutes earlier before Ultraman died, you idiot? But anyway,
Ito always hated Ultraman.
you know, and it's funny too because watching it, that's another one of them little subtexts. He didn't hate him, but you did get that feeling there was a little bit of jealousy.
Mm.
That because there's an episode where they're trying to beat this monster and nobody can stop him, and Ito's just running himself ragged because he was the inventor,
Mm-hmm.
and he's running himself ragged trying to come up with something to beat this monster, and you do kind of get that impression that there's a little bit of insecurity there.
Mm. He's just jealous of Ultraman's big red suit.
It could be.
Okay, so the original Ultraman ran 49, something like that, episodes, if I recall right.
Yeah, it was somewhere around 40.
Somewhere around 40 episodes. Actually, wait, I'll check. The answer is 39. Okay, I was close. It was 39 episodes.
Right.
Okay, and so let's take a pause here in our Ultra chronology, since we're going to go skipping through the Ultraman series, not all of them, since there are apparently like 40 of them now, but we're going to touch on a few of the major ones. But let's take a step back now then and talk about how you first encountered Ultraman. So how did you first encounter Ultraman, Don?
You know what's funny is I can absolutely vividly remember the day.
Really? Okay, tell us.
Yeah, because it was before I started school, so I must have been about 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in the living room, sitting on the floor in front of the coffee table watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was out shoveling the walk. And the very first episode that I don't know if they showed here, because I didn't see any advertising for the show. I don't remember. It just kind of appeared. It was the one with the mummy.
Okay.
With the mummy that was linked to the big, the big Chinese dragon-looking 4-legged monster thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember because the show started, and we were only a couple minutes in, and my grandfather came in after shoveling the walk, wearing his blue jacket and his dark blue hat.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember because he looked at me and goes, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Ultraman." And then he sat down and we watched Ultraman.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the very first time I'd ever seen it.
Right. Huh. Okay, well, that's a good memory. So this would probably then have been, what, about 75? We're talking 75, 76 here, are we?
Earlier.
So 74, 73 then, somewhere in that area. Okay.
Yeah. Now, how about you? When did you see it first?
The very first time I saw the original Ultraman, the original Ultraman I saw for the first time, what? Maybe about 15 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't see it until like it became available for like download online. Because for those who aren't familiar, Ultraman, the very original series, was syndicated across the United States. And this happened in like the early 70s, as we've obviously gone through. And it was dubbed in English, and it was, from what I understand, super popular. However, if you lived in Canada, as we do, and you would have to live in a border city to actually see it, because as far as I know, it wasn't actually syndicated in Canada. And so as an end result, my city of London, Ontario, didn't happen to receive an American station that carried Ultraman. So I never saw it. I never saw the original. In fact, I never saw an Ultraman, anything, basically, until I went to university, until I was living in Windsor.
Wow.
Technically, my first Ultraman series is Ultraman Towards the Future.
Wow. Okay.
That is technically my first Ultraman series, and we'll get to that later on. Just to give you a heads up, folks, that was an Ultraman series that was actually made in Australia, not Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Might. So, yeah, Ultraman might. Well, there goes our Australian listener. Anyway, although they might remember it fondly.
Right.
So, yeah, actually, so because of that, I mean, everybody I knew who lived in a border city, grew up of our age, watched Ultraman, and usually has at least some memories, if not fond memories, of watching it. And it was actually quite popular. But unfortunately, I lived in an Ultraman dead zone. So I could get kaiju movies and stuff like that from American Independent Station. WUAB 43 Cleveland was our local American Independent Station. But unfortunately, the one thing they didn't carry was Ultraman.
Wow.
Because that was on another channel in their area that we couldn't get. Not with our cable package here. And we didn't have a good aerial, so we couldn't get the others. So yeah, Ultraman was not part of my childhood, I'm afraid.
That's so weird because ever since I met you, you've been obsessed with Ultraman.
That's probably why. Because I feel like that's a missed part of my childhood. Because I was a huge, as we talked about in the Kaiju Giant Monster episode, I was a huge Giant Monster stuff fan.
Right.
But, and this is the truly sad part, I couldn't get Ultraman, which would have been my most favorite show in the world when I was 5 to 10 years old. That would have been my greatest, most favorite show ever. Instead, I had to watch reruns of the old Superman and Batman shows.
Yikes.
And occasionally Wonder Woman. That was what I got in terms of live-action superheroes when I was a kid after school.
And you know what's funny about that, too?
Hold on, just a sec. Hold that thought. I have to let the dog down. Right back.
Okay.
What were you about to say? Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, do you remember, when we first met, you were referred to as the guy who never saw anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, long ago. That's why. Is because I couldn't see anything because I didn't have the good TV channels you guys got out of Detroit.
Wow. So you never saw Johnny Sokko when you were a kid?
Nope.
Oh. That's another
So you guys were watching Ultraman, you were watching Johnny Sokko. What else were you watching?
We had all kinds of
you were watching all this weird stuff out of the American channels. And we couldn't get any of that. Not here in London. It was kind of like a dead zone. I feel even more sorry for the people up in more northern Ontario. But then again, they probably got Detroit channels as part of their package.
Yeah, this was way before any kind of package. They broadcast out of Detroit, which is 2 kilometers to the north of me. So
I know, and that's the thing. You were getting all the decent Detroit stations, like Channel 20, for example. Channel 20 Detroit would have been awesome to have. And the thing is, I could even see it in my TV guide. So I could see the listings for it there, but I couldn't get those channels. I had no way to get them. So I knew what it was playing, and it was all the stuff I wanted to see, but I couldn't see it. The other one that I knew about but couldn't was Channel 29 out of Buffalo, which you wouldn't be familiar with, because we're halfway between. And so we could see the listings for Channel 29 out of Buffalo, which also showed Ultraman and all that good stuff. Again, couldn't see it, not here in London, Ontario.
Yeah, we could get 29. Because one of the things we used to do, and this is one of the things I miss nowadays. One of the things as a kid I used to love about TV was that anybody under the age of 30 probably wouldn't understand, is that you had a lot of the local networks, the small channels, that would just show whatever crap they had on hand to fill time. So you'd get TV channels were radically different from each other. And what we used to do when I was a little kid, because again, growing up with a mad scientist grandfather, we'd built an amp for the TV and the aerial. And what we used to do, and I don't know if anybody's going to get in trouble for this, but when we were kids, we used to have, we'd wire the amp up to the aerial on the roof. And we had I forget, I don't know the technical term. We called it a coil booster that we built for the amp. It's basically like like a really coarse induction coil, so it would pull in more of the signal.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to go up on the roof. My buddy Ed would climb up on the roof. This is when we were little kids. We're like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd hook this thing up, and then we'd just screw around with the antenna on the roof, and we'd just pick up all these bizarre stations.
Mm-hmm.
And you never knew what you'd get, because it was how strong was their signal, and it depended on weather, because if you know anything about the old broadcast...
Yeah, ionosphere and everything, right.
Yeah, and they'd bounce off. If there was high cloud cover in between, that would sometimes help, because the signals would bounce off the clouds, and you get these, like, you could just barely make it out for all the static, and we saw all kinds of strange-ass shows like that.
Right, including apparently, wow, so you were actually getting stuff on the other side of me, but unfortunately I didn't have a mad scientist grandfather to help out, so I didn't get to see any of that stuff, except when I went to visit my grandparents in Hamilton, then I could watch 29. So that's why I knew what 29 was showing, the TV Guide, plus I could watch that stuff occasionally. And of course, I didn't have any family members or anyone living in Windsor, so I didn't get to see that stuff.
Yeah. Because 29 had there was a kid show, I think it was called Barnaby.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Where the guy looked like, he was like an old mobster.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's Barnaby, yep.
All right, you kids, today we're going to learn you something. Yeah, I remember that, because that used to freak me out when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Are you sure Barnaby was like 29?
Why is Al Capone babysitting?
I thought Barnaby was out of Cleveland or out of Ohio, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, because I don't remember, because like I said, we used to, whatever would come in that morning was what we'd watch for a couple hours before school, if we went. Yeah, because that was one of the things, like, back in the day, we were looking for, like, more Ultraman.
I bet you were. I would have been looking... it's a kind of good, though, that I didn't know Ultraman actually existed. Because if I knew it existed but wasn't able to get it, it would have driven me nuts.
I can understand. Because, yeah, we got that. You got Johnny Sokko. And once Johnny Sokko came a couple years later... And that was one of the ones, once that came out, we had this sneaking suspicion that there was more of this stuff out there somewhere. And that was why we'd start screwing around trying to find it.
The answer is Barnaby was out of Cleveland.
Okay.
Yeah, Barnaby was out of Cleveland. And in fact, apparently he's one of those TV show hosts that was around, kids show host, who was basically on forever. He was actually a kid show from like the 60s, but apparently he was on for a long time. Wow. So the version of Barnaby you're remembering was not a young man. He apparently started fairly young and kind of went from there. The actual actor's name was Linn Sheldon.
Oh, okay. Why does that sound familiar? That sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was the host from what? From the 60s to the 80s. And yeah, that was was that WAB he was on? Oh, let me see. Sorry. No, I'm curious. Okay, we've gotten completely off track. We'll get back on track in a sec. And let's see. Yeah, because the original Barnaby character apparently had pointy ears. He was an elf who lived in an enchanted forest and showed kids cartoons. Usually Popeye.
Okay, and then later got hooked up with the mob?
Well, yeah, that happened later. Okay, here we go. It aired from 57 to 67. Okay. And then reprised on independent TV station WAB Channel 43, which was the one I grew up with.
Okay.
Which is now Cleveland's MyTV network affiliate, and aired from 68 to 1990.
Wow.
So yes. That's why I do remember Barnaby vaguely, but for whatever reason, Barnaby, even though I could get him, I suspect he was just a character that I just was never interested in. Like, the stuff that he was showing, I just wasn't interested in. So I didn't actually bother to watch it. I'm not sure. Not sure why, because I watched 43 religiously, but I barely remember Barnaby. Huh. Oh well.
I just remember because it was like for little kids. And yeah, we all just thought, why is that, like, gangster teaching kids, like, proper social behavior and stuff? So,
well, okay, there you go. All right, so let's get back on track here. So,
Okay, so you didn't see Ultraman until wow, okay.
yeah, I didn't see Ultraman until I was at university.
Hmm.
And no, wait, I didn't see the original Ultraman until even later than that because it basically took until the internet came around before I saw Ultraman, the original
Right.
series. The
Yeah.
series I saw was Ultraman Towards the Future in university because that aired in syndication, and I watched it on Channel 20 Detroit while I was living there, going to university. Living in
Yeah.
Windsor, not Detroit. And then my first true
Yeah.
Ultraman series, though, I consider to be Ultraman Tiga,
Oh, okay, which is much later.
which is much later, which is 1997, because that's when
Yeah.
I was living in Japan. And one day I was bored on a Saturday afternoon, flipping around on my TV, which could get like maybe about 10 stations in Japan when I was living in
Mhm.
Matsuyama, in Shikoku. And I stumbled across Ultraman Tiga.
Mhm.
And I was like, this looks like an Ultraman series. But that can't be an Ultraman series. They're not making any new Ultraman series. And lo and behold, it was. So I started watching Ultraman Tiga religiously every week, every Saturday afternoon that I could. Because it was late, like 5 or 5:30 on Saturday afternoons in the local channel. And yeah, so I watched it then. And so that's, I consider my first true Ultraman series, because Towards the Future is sort of an Ultraman series, but it's not quite a standard one because it was made involving foreigners. That's my take on it anyway.
Eh,
I don't consider it a true Ultraman series. It kind of is, but it's really odd.
it is. I kind of, because I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Because it was
I
my
mean, I'll link
third
to it in the show
Ultraman
notes. There are
series
episodes of it on
that I saw.
YouTube, so if people want to see what I'm
Technically.
talking about, Towards the Future is there.
Mhm.
Hell, we're talking about it now, so we might as well get done. So basically, what happened is that Tsuburaya made a couple efforts to restart the Ultraman franchise. The Ultraman series basically ran from the mid '60s until 1980, when Ultraman 80 was basically the last of the Ultraman series of the original set.
Yeah.
And then basically Ultraman stopped for about 9 years, 9 or 10 years, depending. And they didn't know what to do with it, and so they decided to try making some American Ultraman series. And
Yeah.
so they made Towards the Future, which was an Australian co-production,
Yeah.
and we were just talking about it. It's not bad. It's not a horrible show, but it's a little bit stilted and a little bit weird. But
Yeah.
it was enough to make me interested in Ultraman, like to get my interest up. But the problem is the monster fights in Towards the Future are a little bit dull, shall we say, comparatively anyway, compared to our proper Ultraman series.
Yeah.
They're kind of just Ultraman posing, and the monster poses, and they kind of take a few whacks at each other, and then they shoot energy bolts back and forth.
Yeah.
And then after Towards the Future, they actually tried to make an American Ultraman series, which is Ultraman the Ultimate Hero in 1993. And that didn't work very well because it was kind of a remake of the original Ultraman with American actors and
Ish.
really, yeah, kind of. And well, no, it was sort of a remake of the original Ultraman, and they had mostly American actors, but it's really stilted. And the acting
Yeah.
isn't very good, and the monster fights aren't very good. Apparently, they had like one monster costume, I heard, so they couldn't afford to damage them between takes. So the end result is that you get a whole lot of. They have really nice looking monster costumes, but they can't damage them, so the fights are really dull. And there's only like a dozen episodes of that.
Yeah.
And so it didn't even really get a proper syndication, I don't think, because it was so awkward and awful done. So at least outside, it was shown in Japan, but not in the United States. And then eventually the Japanese smartened up, and Super R Productions said, screw it, we're just going to make our own again. And so they made Ultraman Tiga, which aired from 96 to 97.
Yeah.
And it's late 96 to late 1997, because when I started watching it, it was probably about May, I think, May or June of 97, and they were only maybe about a third of the way through the show at that point. Maybe a little more than a third of the way, but anyway. Yeah. But actually, and then there's been a whole bunch of Ultraman series since almost every year since Tiga, since 1996, there's been an Ultraman series almost every year. There have been a few they skip, but generally speaking, there's been one sort of. But we kind of jumped ahead in time. Let's rewind a little bit, okay?
Okay.
Since we're jumping around in time by accident. It's because of it's my fault, totally my fault. Anyway,
Well, that's okay.
so Ultraman aired, and it was a huge ultra mega hit, if you'll pardon the pun. I don't know if that counts as a pun, but I'm going to call it a pun anyway. And so they said, okay, we need to make more. They wanted more the following year. What did they make, Don?
The one that came after Ultraman was Ultra 7.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about Ultra 7.
That's another one that a lot of people liked. And I have to say, I finally saw Ultra 7. The funny thing is, TBS and a couple other stations would use little like bits and pieces during commercial bumpers and that from Ultra 7. So I'd seen some of the monsters and that, just fleeting bits, but I'd never seen the show until, again, when I was in like university. We've managed to snag I remember it was one tape, which nobody listening remembers, with like 4 episodes.
Okay.
And it was kind of a similar idea. What you got to understand is, I think to explain, the original Ultraman took place in the far off future of 1992.
Mm-hmm.
Remembering it was made in made in like 66. And the idea of the Science Patrol was that they were this group of like, they used high tech equipment and they dealt with monsters and disasters. They were kind of like Thunderbirds in that way. And the Ultra 7 kind of continued that tradition, because that was Ultra 7. It was another one of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
And the premise was that Ultra 7 was another Ultraman that came to Earth. Mm-hmm. He took the appearance of a human. He didn't actually kill one this time. He borrowed the image, because there's an episode about that where they find out that there's 2 of this guy. Mm-hmm. And then he just sort of shows up at the new, what were they called in Ultra 7? The Science Patrol guys.
The Science Patrol in Ultra 7 were called the
Ultra Force.
Squad.
The Ultra Squad, yeah.
In English, they're called the Ultra Squad. In Japanese, they're called the Ultra Garrison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's them.
Same thing. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and this guy basically just shows up and said, "Hi, I'd like to be on your team." And they're like, who are you now?"
Mm-hmm.
But he ends up like telling them about there's going to be monsters, and then he joins and they fight, and he's actually Ultra 7.
Right.
And it was a similar idea to the original Ultraman, except they amped up the violence. That was one of the things I liked, because his finishing move was using his head fin to chop the enemy monster into pieces most of the time.
Yeah, it was pretty gory.
Yeah, and it was also, we'd mentioned before, this was the one where Ultra 7 had Pokemon.
Yeah, he's the original Pokemon master.
Yeah. With, he had, was it 3 of them?
Yes,
3
he's capsule monsters, yep.
Yeah, and he'd send them out to fight to either soften up the monster, or if he needed a cover so he wouldn't reveal his identity, he'd like throw one of these things out and the monster would fight while he could come up with an excuse. "Oh no, my ear bladder's acting up, I have to run away." And then he'd turn into Ultra 7 and mayhem would ensue.
So, if I recall right, couldn't Dan Moriboshi, Ultra 7, basically, couldn't he actually stay giant for longer or stay active for longer because he wasn't merged with someone he was like doing a body share with?
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember there being any limits on that.
Because I do remember he does have a limiter, because I think it's like the light on his head or something blinks.
Oh, it might be, but I don't remember it coming up that often.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I think it's something that happens occasionally to generate drama. But if I remember right, I don't think I think he can run out of energy, basically. Or run out of, to stay giant, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're right, because sometimes he actually fights in his human-sized form.
Yeah.
Which is one of the neater things about Ultra 7. He'll actually have whole episodes where he won't even go giant size.
Yeah, because they focused more on the idea of aliens.
Mm-hmm.
In that one, that it was extraterrestrial. He'd interact more. They had more human-scaled aliens than Ultraman did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, usually there'd be human-scale aliens, and then he'd fight them, and then one of them would, like, grow to giant size or something, usually.
Yeah.
Or they'd have some, like, backup plan or something that involved one of them getting giant. Or their spaceship or robot or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, but he interacted with the human ones a lot more than his predecessor did.
Yeah, human scale ones. And I think that's something actually that I don't think carried over to the later Ultra series, what I've seen of them anyway. The majority of them are very rarely in human size. Most of them can only be giant size or occasionally a short time in human size.
Yeah.
But Ultra 7 would actually fight in human size. That makes them a little different than the other ones.
Yeah, of the ones I've seen, he's the one that did that the most.
And ironically enough, he's perhaps the most popular of all of them.
Yeah, I can see it, though, because Ultra 7 had just the weirdest monsters and the strangest stories.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it did, from what I've seen of it, because I've seen a number of episodes. And yeah, they get really bizarre, especially as the series goes on. It's like they were literally just trolling through science fiction magazines going, what's the most bizarre ideas we can find? And then, how do we turn this into an Ultraman episode?
Yeah, it's like, my favorite for that is the one monster, he's half dinosaur, half battleship with treads.
Yeah, I don't even know what that thing's called.
I don't either, but it's awesome.
Oh, I was thinking the one where just spontaneously, Dan and another guy, I don't remember which one it is, basically get sent off to another planet on a spaceship. They discover that the other planet is run by a totalitarian government, help to overthrow it, and it's also some kind of like nega Earth or something like that. They help to overthrow the totalitarian government and like beat its badass monster. Then they hop back in their ship in suspended animation and travel the journey back to Earth. And all of this happens in like 20 minutes. Well, 20 minutes our time, not even 20 minutes theirs. But it's just like, oh, wait, what? And then it's never brought up again that apparently they have like long-range spaceships that they can do this with. Or maybe it is brought up again, but I just haven't seen those episodes. Because I've seen a couple of them. I haven't seen all of them.
Yeah, well, that was a carryover from the original. Because remember, this was like the 1960s when we knew the future was going to be jetpacks and jumpsuits, but not exactly sure how.
True. Because
the original had a lot of loose travel time through space. Because remember, if I put a booster on your jet fighter, you could fly to Mars in like 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of that, because they did imply that in most of the series that humans have at least the beginnings of moving out into the universe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Ultra 7, which was completely awesome, aired and did very well, and that would then be followed by The Return of Ultraman.
Yep, with Ultraman Jack.
With Ultraman Jack, because that's what he's referred to. Because he's actually just called Ultraman in the series. I don't think they actually call him Jack, do they?
No, I think that came. Later. It wasn't part of the show. It was for like the promotional material and tie-ins.
And to distinguish him, because all these Ultra series, by the way, I should tell our listeners, actually all take place in the same setting, supposedly.
Yeah. More or less, they do.
Yeah, more or less they do. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, characters from the previous series show up in the new ones, and Ultraman do cross, like, every Ultra series of the original set anyway, do meet the guys from the previous shows in some episodes. They come in and guest star.
Yeah, because Ultraman Jack does meet Ultraman 7, Ultra 7 in one of the episodes.
Does he meet the original Ultraman?
Not that I've seen. I'm about 2/3 of the way through watching it right now, while we're recording.
Okay. So, the Return of Ultraman is famous for a number of things. For those listeners who might actually be Evangelion fans or Gainax fans, you should know that the creator of Evangelion, Hideaki Anno, The Return of Ultraman is perhaps one of his most favorite shows in the world. Mm-hmm. And in fact, actually having seen a little bit of The Return of Ultraman, you can actually see it in Evangelion. You can actually see it in some of the Gainax stuff that they do, but especially Evangelion. And in fact, actually, even Evangelion and Return of Ultraman both share a theme. What is that theme, Don?
Well, Return of Ultraman, which is, again, it's one of the ones that was never shown here in North America. Mm-hmm. What ends up happening is they take this weird supernatural kind of bend with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this was the one where, like we said before, the original Ultraman, you got the impression he was like a space cop.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the series, I since I'm not done yet, I don't know if they explicitly say it, but it's implied in a few episodes that they're portraying the beings from the M78 Nebula, the Ultramen, that they're actually spiritual beings. I know later on they refer to them as they're like angels, what we'd consider to be an angel.
And that series, at least the little bits I've seen, seems to have a lot of heavy Christian mythology, doesn't it? Or symbolism, sorry. Heavy Christian symbolism.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of that it's kind of suppressed, but you can really feel it, that they're starting to take this more spiritual, supernatural aspect with the idea of these big, giant, godlike entities.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. Ultraman Angels. Huh, that sounds kind of familiar. Mm-hmm. And so I've noted that, a lot of Japanese fans actually seem to consider Return of Ultraman one of the best Ultra series. Usually they rank it under 7, usually, of course. 7's the most popular of them, of the originals. But Return of Ultraman definitely has a real cult following.
Yeah. It is quite good.
Yeah, from what I've seen of it, it is. I mean, they have really interesting ways of shooting the monster fights and presenting the episodes. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those ones that I do wish was actually available subbed in English. Or if my Japanese was good enough to actually be able to go through it and actually watch it in earnest, because I think based on the few episodes I've seen on YouTube, it actually looks pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. It also kind of seems to be a reaction to Ultra 7.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like we said, Ultra 7, Dan Moroboshi, Ultraman, mm-hmm. Ultra 7's human identity, just kind of shows up at the Ultra Garrison and he's like, "Hi, I'm here," and he's awesome and everybody loves him, blah, blah, blah. Whereas in The Return of Ultraman, the main guy's name is Go,
mm-hmm.
that Ultraman shares a life with. Because he's linked with Ultraman, he's got all these superpowers. He's super athletic and he's strong and has endurance. And he shows up at MAT headquarters and
mm-hmm.
he takes the test and they're like, "This guy is astounding, hire him." And then he kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the other team, they reference that, and it really looks like they're hitting the idea that because he's off the street and doesn't have all the training the rest of them do, he's not actually as good as the rest of them, that the raw ability doesn't compensate for that.
Huh, funny that.
Mm-hmm. And like I say, it seemed like a reaction to how Ultra 7 went.
Right. I could totally see that. And so it was also a fairly serious series, if I remember right. It was they actually play things pretty straightforward, right? It's not a comedy series, or not a more lighthearted kiddie one, I should say.
No, they do what the original shows did, where you'll have a comedy episode or a dramatic mm-hmm. episode. The difference with this one, though, over the previous 3 is that they don't frame it off different.
Okay.
Like in the other ones, if they did a horror episode,
How so?
They filmed it like a horror episode. It would look different. And the same with if they did a comedy episode, it would be paced different. It would be filmed different. Return of Ultraman, every episode is kind of framed off and filmed the same way, mm-hmm. but it's the themes will change and what happens in the story changes.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so in the interest of time, we will continue on our little trip to Ultraman Lane, I guess. Return of Ultraman was followed by Ultraman Ace, which I think I'm more familiar with Ace than you are.
I've only seen little bits.
I've only seen probably just a bit more than you, but I always found Ace interesting because Ace is a case where what happens at the beginning of Ace, as usual, someone dies and they basically become Ultraman. But the catch with Ultraman Ace is it's actually 2 people who die at the beginning. There's a nurse, and a female nurse, in fact, and I think he's an ambulance driver, but I'm not sure. I don't quite remember what his name is. Actually, his name is Hokuto. Her name is Minami. I remember that because which are their north and south in Japanese. And anyway, so they both die during a monster attack. Ace resurrects them and basically says, "Look, here are these 2 rings. If you put these 2 rings together, you can join together and become Ultraman Ace. The 3 of us will join together and be a giant Ultra being and kick monster butt." And so Ultraman Ace is famous for being, among other things, a hermaphrodite, because technically it's both a man and a woman, although he appears mostly male. And
which is how Judeo-Christian angels are typically described.
That's true. Well, very true. And it continues on as you might expect. They end up joining their version of the Science Patrol. They encounter monsters and fight monsters. Although there's a catch partway through, and maybe it's because they decided the gimmick was just becoming too troublesome or something. Partway through, the female half leaves, and she gives she gives the male half both rings, and now he apparently can just tap the rings together on different hands or something, and he can become Ace by himself. Yeah, and Ace continues on. From what I know, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think Ace starts fairly serious, but I believe it actually starts to veer away from the general audience and starts to go more towards the kid show side of things. Like, it starts to become just more of a pure kid show. And though maybe not completely with Ace. Ultraman Taro, which follows Ace, I'm going to speed through these. Ultraman Taro literally is a kid show. Same with Ultraman Leo that come after that. Yeah. They're basically kid show Ultraman. Taro, if I remember right, is it Taro that's supposed to be like the Ultra Prince, basically, who's the son of the Ultra King? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think it is Taro.
I think it is Taro. Yeah. And then there's also Ultraman Leo, who I don't really know anything about. I know it's more, again, one of those more kiddie ones. Yeah. It's more kidified. Taro and Leo, when I say they're being kid shows, I mean, for example, they basically are almost more like a Sentai where they have set alien villains. And basically the alien villain of the week basically sends monsters each week to fight them. That's what I mean, but it's no longer really an anthology show at this point. It's just bad guys sending monsters of the week to fight our heroes.
Yeah, the nature of the fights in that it's toned down compared to the previous ones.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Although you do get some weird stuff. Like, I think it's Leo, might be Taro, but that there's actually a shot I've seen where the other Ultramen show up to help out, and the monster kicks their butts and crucifies them. You can actually see a shot of them all like up on crucifixes, having been crucified by the monster. These are all the older Ultramen, and then I think it's Leo has to save them. There's a shot of that kicking around I've seen in a magazine years ago. So, but anyway, so this was a little more kiddie stuff. They did try to change course a little bit with Ultraman 80, which I believe is meant to be a little more serious. Ultraman 80, I think, is Ultraman Joe, I think he's referred to as. I think that's what they call him. Or maybe it's just 80. I'm not sure. You can distinguish 80 because he's one of the rare Ultramen that has a red fin. The fin across the top of his head is red. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
Oh, you'd know him to see him because he's kind of short looking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was Ultraman Joe. I think it was again like the Ultraman Jack thing. It was a name they added after the show to differentiate from the other ones.
Yep. Although I often see him referred to as 80 instead. I mean, they'll just I think they call him Ultraman Joe, but I think I've seen fans, at least the English fans, refer to him as 80 instead. But they will refer to Return of Ultraman's character as Ultraman Jack. Yeah. Unfortunately, at this point, because of years of Ultraman being, and they were doing a new show every year, by the way, almost every year. There was a gap between 75 and 79 between Leo and 80. But by then, the damage had kind of been done. One. Which one?
No, you forgot one, because remember, in 1979, they did The Ultraman, which was the animated series.
Yeah, I was doing my best to forget that one.
Okay.
Well, that was the American animated series, wasn't it? That was done with Hanna-Barbera.
No, that comes later.
It really?
Yeah, that was...
that's right, there was a Japanese Ultraman series. Yes, animated one.
Yep. Because it's the one, it's kind of like Star Blazers meets Ultraman.
Yes, right.
And it was another one, it wasn't bad. This was when the animation was starting to take over in Japan, and that was becoming the big thing.
Right, yeah, this was during their great animation boom.
Yep. And it looked like that was one of their first attempts to try to serious it up a little bit again.
Yep. Well, they were being pretty straightforward with it. If fans want to actually see it, It was actually not aired in the United States, but what the Americans did is in '81 they released a quote unquote feature length movie for the English market, which is basically several episodes edited together of this series under the Adventures of Ultraman. And then there's another one that was released in '83 called Ultraman 2, The Further Adventures of Ultraman, which is again just 4 episodes of the series just jammed together basically.
Yeah.
And dubbed in English. So you can
As
probably find those.
Yeah, as I understand, though, the movie version is a slightly different version of the series story.
Okay.
I think I remember reading it because I've seen the movie.
Okay.
And I've seen a couple episodes of the actual series, but just from the beginning, so they weren't really getting into anything yet.
Right. Apparently, Ultraman 2: The Further Adventures of Ultraman is actually the first 4 episodes of the series.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and it has no continuity with the previous English dub. For whatever reason, it's another attempt to really release the series in English. I suspect it was probably, if they released it as the first 4 episodes of the series, they were probably using it as a pilot, I bet, to try to get the actual series to air here or something. Something like that, maybe. I do remember seeing them years and years ago. But it was, literally, wow, actually, you know something? Now that I think about it, this probably was my first Ultraman. I think I actually did see this before I actually saw a live-action Ultraman. I think I actually did see one of these movies back when I was a kid. Now that I think about it. I think I did, but I saw it on videotape. I didn't see it on TV. But I saw one of these on videotape when I was probably like 12 or 13 or something like that. Somewhere in that area. Anyway. So I think I saw one of these, and so that was one of the reasons why, because I'd seen pictures of Ultraman, so I knew what Ultraman was. But again, I don't really count these because I don't really count this as a real Ultra series because it's not live action.
Oh, okay.
That's one of my personal bias, right?
That works.
But I mean, because it to me, it was an English chopped up hack job dub of presenting Ultraman, and it was kind of stilted and everything.
Yeah.
So that's why it didn't attract me a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
And again, it's very Star Blazers-esque. Like they're mostly operating out of their space battleship and they fight monsters. But anyway, I'll see if I can find a link. I'm sure this is probably on YouTube somewhere. I'll see if I can find them for the show notes.
That works.
All right. So
that was
again in the interest of time. So now we're caught up to 80, and we already talked about the gap that existed for about 10 years between 80 and Tiga.
Well, yeah, but remember in between there was the Hanna-Barbera one.
Yeah. Okay, you can talk about that.
Well, there's not a lot to say. It was they did a pilot, and if anybody remembers 80s cartoons, what you always did was you did the movie, which could then be broken down into 5 episodes. That would be your first week of show. Mm-hmm. And they basically made the animated American Ultraman, which they call Ultraman USA. Yes.
The actual show itself was called Ultraman The Adventures Begin.
Yeah.
Okay. The Adventure Begins, sorry. Ultraman The Adventure Begins.
Yeah. And if you've seen 80s Japanese sci-fi cartoons, you've kind of seen this. Like, it wasn't terrible. Mm-hmm. Like, I watched it just a couple years ago again. It wasn't terrible. It's not great. It's kind of an also-ran. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it didn't get picked up, because at the time you just had Robotech, and people were becoming aware of the Japanese stuff in general. So there were things that were more entertaining available, and this kind of just looked like, well, okay, nice try, but...
Right, yeah. Also, it was a little bit Americanized and such, and I think maybe that was part of the reason why it didn't quite take off.
Yeah, it could be.
Not that American stuff is automatically bad or anything like that, but at the time, I think it might... who knows? I just remember it being, again, not very well written. It was a little stilted. It was okay, kind of.
Yeah, it's just sort of there.
Because it was about, if I remember right, it's about, there's 2 guys and a girl, and they're, 2 men and a woman, because they're not kids, oddly enough. And
the one guy he's like the young brash guy.
He's young brash guy, but they're more like university student age, really. They're like, they're about, around their 20s or something like that, aren't they?
Yeah, except for the grizzled old leader of the team. who there always was. So
Right. Well, there's the three of them anyway, and they
Yeah.
become three Ultramen, or Ultra beings, basically. Two Ultramen, one Ultra Woman. And they fight monsters.
yeah, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've covered that detour, we get to what are referred to as the Heisei Ultramen, which start with Ultraman Tiga.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that should be noted: the Heisei Ultraman. Heisei is basically the period. It's a term for it's the emperor that was ruling at that period, that point in Japan. And by the way, the emperor there's still an emperor in Japan, right? Mm-hmm. So they often refer to different eras by which emperor was around. And this is the Heisei period. That's why you'll actually sometimes hear the 90s Godzilla stuff referred to as the Heisei Godzilla period. Well, this is the Heisei Ultraman period, which follows its own continuity. Ultraman to Ultraman 80 are basically considered to be one sort of continuity, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
Well, after this, almost every Ultra series, not all of them, but almost has its own continuity of sorts, which we'll cover this. Okay, so we get to the Heisei ones, which start with Tiga in 96. Tiga is basically, in some ways, almost a remake of the original Ultraman, but with new monsters and new approaches and more modern special effects, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And it's a fairly straight-up traditional Ultraman series, general audience. It has horror episodes, it has comedy episodes. Like, they really try to mix it up. And there's some really good episodes to Tiga. A lot of our listeners might be familiar with the attempted English dub of Ultraman Tiga that came out on Fox TV back in like the 2000s, played on the Fox box. You should be aware that dub was kind of a half-assed comedy dub. Basically what it was the people who were dubbing it weren't taking their job entirely seriously, even though they technically were supposed to. So you end up with a lot of weird jokes and weird comedy and a horrible theme song. Well, actually, theme song, I guess, wasn't that horrible. But anyway, regardless.
Yeah. It was the 90s.
It was the 90s, yeah. Well, actually, this aired in the early 2000s, if I remember right. But the original Tiga theme song is actually pretty good. I actually like it. The Japanese one, it has a great opening. And Tiga's actually, let's just say the American one, they kiddied it up a bit. And they also edited it as well. So if you get the chance, there are actually full sets of the original Ultraman Tiga subtitled kicking around torrents online. You can find them. And I recommend actually checking it out if you're interested. If you think that the original Ultraman stuff would be too kiddie for you just not your cup of tea, Tiga might actually be a good choice to actually try out as your full Ultra series, because it actually is a really good one. In fact, it's probably still my favorite Ultra series. I still love Tiga. And not just because I watched it in Japan. Tiga was followed by Dyna, which is a lot like Ultraman Tiga. In fact, it literally takes place in the same setting. It's literally a sequel to Ultraman Tiga, except Dyna has more of a space focus to it, where they actually travel around the solar system. There's like a solar system wide, and in fact, they go out into the galaxy. They have faster-than-light ships. Still mostly Earth-based, but Ultraman Dyna has more of a space focus to it. It's a little more lighthearted than Tiga. I wouldn't quite call it as... It's not exactly kiddie, but it's a little more energetic and optimistic than Tiga is. Tiga could actually get a little heavy sometimes, whereas Dyna's a little more light.
Oh, is Dyna the one with the nut punch?
I think it is. I think that's Dyna, yeah. Tiga's partner, Daigo, is actually a little more serious, whereas Dyna's partner is the opposite, basically. He's more energetic, and he gets smacked around a lot by the rest of the team. He's actually kind of like the Ultra Man Jack. It's like a kind of thing where he is actually an experienced fighter pilot, so he has actual military training, but the rest of the team still treats him like their kid brother and kind of like, they're pretty hard on him, basically. But Ultraman Dyna is actually, for its just sheer fun factor, is actually a really good series. Yeah. Then they decide to do something a little different with Ultraman Gaia. And these three together are kind of referred to as the Heisei Ultraman trilogy. Because Gaia ran the year after, so it ends in 1999. Gaia is a science fiction series, oddly enough, I classify it almost closer to the Thunderbirds or UFO, like some of the British stuff.
Okay.
It's got a strong feeling of that kind of thing, where it's really a science fiction series that has an Ultraman in it, would be the better way to describe Gaia.
Okay.
The main premise of Gaia is that the main hero, Gaia himself is actually supposed to be an avatar of the Earth spirit. Okay? Gaia is actually supposed to represent a kind of antibody, basically. That the Earth is under attack by these malevolent alien life forces, and Gaia manifests to protect the Earth and merges with the hero whose name I can't remember offhand, but who's a young science student. He's a genius. He's like, Reed Richards, like Tony Stark level genius kid. But he basically merges with him and then ends up joining the... Oh my god, I can't remember what I think they're called Guard. But basically, they have a giant shield helicarrier. And what happens is he joins up as their science advisor. He's actually not a frontline fighter. That's one of the things that makes Gam. Gam is his name. Gam joins up not as a quote-unquote science advisor after he joins with Gaia, because he wants to basically be on site and find out where monsters are going to be. So he joins Guard and ends up as their science advisor, which means he is usually hanging out with the commander on missions. He's basically the commander's kind of like science Spock type assistant. Meanwhile, there are all these different teams. Like, there are several teams of fighter pilots. There's teams of, land? I don't remember what they're called, but they pilot these kind of wheeled tanks to fight monsters. And then there's also undersea guys and space guys. And they all have different teams. They're all teams of like 3 guys, and each of them will have a vehicle. And they're the frontline fighters. And so every episode, he and the leader guy basically team up with one of these other teams to fight or just deal with one of these monsters that's running around, and try to figure out what it's doing and how to stop it. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of a neat series in the sense that, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but this is kind of what's going on. There's actually 2 types of monsters in Gaia. There's Earth monsters that are kind of a byproduct of the life force of the Earth interacting with pollution and such. So some of them are like ancient monsters and like dragons and that have been around forever. And usually they're reacting to humanity. And so he has to kind of calm them down and stop them. And then there are actually alien monsters which are being sent by this malevolent force basically through wormholes. They're basically being teleported to Earth and chucked at the Earth by this mysterious force that, unlike other shows, we don't really know what this mysterious force is. We just know these monsters keep showing up and they get progressively more powerful. Every monster is more powerful than the one before. In fact, actually, you know what? Actually, that's pretty much Pacific Rim. That's pretty much, it's the Pacific Rim concept, where there are aliens of some kind sending these monsters, but they eventually do figure out where they're coming from. And they actually, if I remember right, they do actually go to stop them. They travel to where the aliens are coming from to try to stop them, to keep them from sending these things all the time. But basically, they're sending them through rifts. And it has a really, which I'm not going to spoil, but Gaia actually has a really cool ending. And it's again, another series that's one of my favorites, as you can probably tell by the way I'm talking about it. Just because it has really neat special effects. I mean, they film it very differently than even Tika or Dinah. All the different groups are kind of neat. Each team of the fighters has their own personality, and they all have different. Yeah, they're all really neat. Team Crow is probably my favorite, which is an all-female squad of fighter pilots, and they're actually pretty cool. But some of the other ones, Team Lightning is pretty good. Anyway, they're really neat. I highly recommend Gaia. You can actually find subbed episodes of it kicking around online, but only like the first maybe 10 episodes are subbed in English. But Gaia is pretty neat. Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
But it's interesting. 2 points was Ultraman Dinah, that idea of Earth and space monsters. They kind of infer that in Return of Ultraman, because about a third of the way through, they start running into monsters from space. Now, I haven't seen if it's that idea that there's an important story distinction, or if it just happened to be this was the hook they're using for the next few monsters. Right. Yeah. And if you're looking for Tiga, they did release 4 sets here in North America on DVD. For some reason, set number 3 is super rare. You can get the other 4 for like $5.
Right.
Those are subtitled versions of the Japanese one, even though they're the Fox release.
Right. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, they don't have the American dub on them at all.
Right. Okay. All right. So continuing on then. Let's see. Gaia was followed by Ultraman Neos, which you
forgot one, kinda.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. What about Ultra Meow?
Oh. Anyway, that was an animated Ultraman series about an Ultraman cat. We're not going to worry about that. All right,
yeah, so those were cool.
No. All right, so Ultraman's. We're going with real Ultraman series. So Ultra was followed by Ultraman Neos, which was a short series. And I thought Neos was actually OAVs, but I've seen it listed as TV. I'm not sure about this. I know it was just short. Ultraman Neos was an attempt to go back to the original continuity. Okay. After doing 3 TV series that basically took place in their own continuity, they tried to go back to the original continuity again. And Neos is actually supposed to be connected with the original ones. That did not go so well. From what I recall, Neos wasn't very well received overall. Then they did Ultraman Cosmos, also referred fondly as Ultraman Pepsi. Yeah, okay. Because he's got Pepsi's color scheme. Well, Cosmos was one of the ones where, they started with Tiga, where the Ultraman would have multiple forms, so they could sell multiple toys of them. And Cosmos looks like in his proper form. He has more than one form. In his proper form, looks like a Pepsi can. That's the way his colors are and everything. He's got the Pepsi colors and such. And the thing about Ultraman Cosmos is Ultraman Cosmos was the attempt to do a kinder, gentler Ultraman. So basically, the main character in Ultraman Cosmos is basically a monster ranger, would be the best way to describe him. He actually works on a monster island where they keep these monsters. And his job basically is to help find a way to reach their hearts and to not kill monsters, but actually kind of make friends with them and such. And Cosmos kind of reflects that by what's happening in Cosmos is there are monsters on Earth, but they generally have them under control. But this weird alien virus thing starts coming down and will basically turn the monsters into a quote unquote dark version of themselves, basically make them go crazy. And so Cosmos basically is about managing them and getting rid of the virus and making them positive again. And driving away their evil energies. And he pretty much has almost no killing attacks, if I remember right. He's a pacifist. He uses weird Tai Chi, martial arts. The whole idea was a pacifist Ultraman, basically. He does have offensive abilities. He does have them, but he very rarely uses them.
That's so sad, because the correct way to reach a monster's heart is a quick blast of a specium ray.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
And that usually gets there pretty fast, I agree.
Yep.
The next Ultraman that I'm familiar with is Ultraman Nexus. Ultraman Nexus was an attempt to do something radically different. Basically, Ultraman Cosmos was the most positive, happy, touchy-feely Ultraman ever. While Ultraman Nexus, they went 100% the other way. 110% the other way. Ultraman Nexus is Ultraman crossed with Men in Black. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen Ultraman Nexus? Do you know what I'm talking about?
When you start to get to the anything after Gaia, I've maybe just seen pictures or snippets from.
Okay. Ultraman Nexus, and they have it on I think it's Crunchyroll or one of the online Asian video sites. They actually have it. I'll see if I can find a link to it. The short version is this. Ultraman Nexus is unique in many ways. One, it's actually fairly dark and serious. And the way they do it is it takes place on a quote-unquote real Earth. But what's happening is these monsters are showing up. But there's this team called Night Raider, basically. And they have the Men in Black thing is they can actually erase people's memories. So they're going around, monsters are showing up and killing people and doing horrible things. And basically the team is stopping them and then erasing the victim's memories so no one remembers. One of the other quirks of Ultraman Nexus is not one person.
Okay.
The Nexus entity / ability gets passed to multiple characters during the series. So they're called Dunamists, if I recall right. But basically the partner. We'll call them the partner ability to be Nexus's partner is actually transferred by, I think, between 3, maybe 4 people during Ultraman Nexus. With at least one of the hosts, I think, actually gets killed. I think it's killed.
Yeah.
It was pretty serious. It was really serious stuff. And in fact, because it was so serious, it wasn't very popular, and it ran short.
Right.
I think most Ultra series run about 50 episodes. It only ran about 30 some odd episodes, I believe. Mm-hmm. I can give you a specific number. Now, unsurprisingly, it ran 37 episodes and 2 DVD specials. Unsurprisingly, Ultraman Nexus is actually a fan favorite in the sense that it's a cult one, especially a lot of American fans. This was actually this was around the time when you started getting fan subbing groups that were releasing stuff on the internet almost as fast as it came out.
Right.
And so for a lot of American fans of Ultraman and live action Japanese stuff, Ultraman Nexus was often their first Ultraman series that they actually saw, subtitled in English. Huh. And they could actually watch it like a week after it came out.
Okay.
And so because it was, dark and gritty, and this was a time when dark and gritty was popular, this was just like right after 9/11 and things like that. And right. Because dark and gritty is Ultraman get, like it's not really dark and gritty. But it's pretty straightforward. So there's a lot of American, tokusatsu fans, Japanese special effects stuff fans, that actually really like Ultraman Nexus. I'm lukewarm on it. It's got some interesting ideas to it. But I don't think it came together very well. Like, I don't think it's a great series, but it's okay.
Right. Okay.
And because it was so dark, they followed it with Ultraman Max.
Okay.
This was 2 years ago, Ultraman Max is an attempt to go back to the its original timeline, and is meant to be fun with a capital F.
Oh, okay. Is that the current one?
No. That's not the current one. We're nowhere near the current one.
Wow.
We're going to run out of Ultraman series that I'm familiar with soon. But Max is also another interesting one in another sense. Max was the first Ultraman series, or one of the first anyway. It ran how many episodes? 40 episodes, okay? And one of the tricks with Ultraman Max is that they wanted it to be fun and interesting. But what they did is they basically invited pretty much every noteworthy film and TV director in Japan and said, hey, you want to make an episode of Ultraman? And let them do it in their own style.
Right.
So, for example, do you know who Takashi Miike is?
It sounds familiar.
Takashi Miike is a Japanese director who's known for directing like really gonzo stuff, mostly horrific stuff. What's his most famous one? He directed Ichi the Killer, Audition, Dead or Alive. He directs really messed up stuff. Okay, and he directed an episode of Ultraman Max, to give you an example. Ultraman Max.
Yikes.
Basically, they pretty much, let's just say, if Kurosawa was alive, Kurosawa would have been invited to direct an episode of Ultraman Max.
I would watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, they were basically, and a lot of episodes are homages to the original one. Okay.
Okay.
The team is Dash. There's actually a guy named Shaun White. He's actually the first foreigner to be an actual member of an Ultra team.
Okay.
He has an actual foreigner.
Technically.
Ultraman Max is... Yeah, it's actually I watched a little bit of it. I've seen a few random episodes. It's actually kind of neat.
Okay.
I actually recommend it. But again, it's light. Like, it's meant to be fun, but they do a lot of neat stuff with it.
Okay.
And I believe it was meant to be part of the original continuity. Okay? Right. That was followed by Ultraman Mobius.
Okay,
Mobius, you might be familiar with, again, is... and it even aired on Crunchyroll. If you know Crunchyroll, it's again one of those drama, Japanese, Chinese, Korean streaming sites here. Even aired Ultraman Mobius. He's another one sent by the father of Ultra to Earth. It's set 40 years after the original Ultraman, and he joins a group called the Crew Guys. That's what they're called now, the Crew Guys. CREWGUYS, or just Guys, GUYS.
Not as good as Guts, but okay, whatever.
Yeah, exactly, Guts from Ultraman Tika. We've got Guts. No, they're just Guys.
Okay.
And this is. It's, again, very homage to the original one. It was actually reasonably popular. Ultraman Mobius aired in... When did it air? 2006 to 2007. Okay, so it aired. Ultraman Mobius is really the last one I'm really familiar with. I'll be honest with you. There have been a couple ones since. There was Ultra 7X in 2007.
Right.
Ultraman 7X follows Ultraman Mobius, but Ultra 7X is weird. It's kind of a remake of Ultraman, or sorry, it's kind of a remake of Ultra 7.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sort of remake. It's only 12 episodes long, and it takes place in the future. And it's very cyberpunk. It's very dark, and it's very cyber. Again, they did Nexus, which is kind of dark. Then they did two relatively light series, and then they did Ultra 7X, which was done for, I think, it was done for late night. It wasn't. It was actually meant for an adult audience, and it's like this super dark future cyberpunk one, and it's Ultra 7X. But again, well, there you go. Let's see. That's followed by a bunch of shows that are basically just kind of repeats of their clip shows of fighting called Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle Series. They did a couple of those. Okay. There was a Neo Ultra Q in 2013, looking at the list. Right. There was also Ultraman Ginga and Ultraman Ginga S. Ginga, if I remember right, let me double check. Ginga, I think I've seen this. Yes, Ginga's the one about the Spark Dolls. Okay. There are only 11 episodes where he basically has the ability to put toys of Ultraman and Ultraman monsters in a little thing, and he turns into them. Huh. That's his ability. This was the 50th anniversary Ultraman series. So he basically had the ability to take classic monsters, and they're called Spark Dolls, and use them to become those monsters to fight other evil monsters and stuff.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some of that.
And I watched like an episode or so of it, and it was like, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah, it's surreal.
Yep, it was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
2015 saw Ultraman X.
Okay.
Ultraman X, which I thought I saw a little bit of. It aired, 22 episodes. Again, fairly straightforward Ultraman series. Mm-hmm. Again, Ultraman X is also using the Spark Dolls thing, because they fell in love with that Spark Dolls concept, and so again, he uses these little, basically, monster action figures to transform into an actual Ultraman or Ultra Monster. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so now here's the weird things though. In Ultraman X, I remember I watched some of it. In Ultraman X, he could actually talk to the dolls, and the dolls talk back.
Okay, so that's usually that's called schizophrenia.
Yeah, usually, but in Ultraman X's case, that's his ability, or one of them is, he can actually talk to the monsters and talk to the dolls.
Wow.
And so you'll literally see him having conversations with his action figures. And the action figures, well, that's true, I know you have. We had the toy episode on, we know you have. So Ultraman X, I couldn't watch very much of it, because the whole doll thing is kind of a turn-off for me. Especially when they're constantly swapping them out. So every fight, I believe, he usually becomes a classic Ultra Monster first. Then he gets his butt kicked as the classic Ultra Monster, and then he'll finally maybe transform into actual Ultraman X to fight the real monster for reals. Right. So it basically ends up being, it's an Ultra toy commercial, just like Ultraman Ginga was.
Okay.
And then later this year, Ultraman Orb, the debuts, which we know very little about. All we know is that there's a new series this year. Right. And now we're caught up.
Because you kind of missed one.
Which one?
Ultraman Nice.
Again, I'm skipping certain things. Now, mind you, you'll know there's a catch. There are actually one or two others that I skipped as well, because I was only looking at the TV series. There are Ultraman films as well, and a few of them, like there's Ultraman Zearth. There's also another one. Oh, what's him? There's Ultraman. I'm trying to remember. There's a guy who's basically like Ultraman. He's like Ultra 7, but he has double blades on his head. Oh, which one is that? Let me check.
Because there's a bunch of those weird movie.
I think that's Ultraman Zero.
Okay.
Is it? Yes, it's Ultraman Zero. There it is. Yeah, Ultraman Zero, who was kind of a movie Ultraman. That he only appears in some direct to movies, basically. Because every now and then they'll skip a year or two. There'll be a little time when there's no Ultraman series, and they usually put movies out during that time. And there's also even been a few direct to video series.
Yeah.
That they've done. They did an Ultra 7 direct to video series. They've done. They did a couple of those. Ultra 7 super popular. They did a couple Ultraman Mobius direct to video series, and an Ultraman Zero one, and movies to go along with that. So yes, there are actually a couple that I've skipped, and Ultraman Nice as well. Okay, sorry.
Because you skipped like the 7 Ultra Brothers versus the Golden Vampires or whatever that one was.
Oh, the 7 Ultra Brothers. Now, are you? You're thinking of the sixth grade Ultra Brothers versus the Monster Army.
Yeah,
and that's the one that was done in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
Because that's the one where a Thai company basically got the rights to do a Ultraman film, and so they did.
Yeah.
And they made an Ultraman movie, and that's the 6 Ultra Brothers versus the Monster Army. I think it might have been a co-production with the Thai one. There's also another one called the Ultra Warriors versus the Giant Monster Army. But that's actually Ultraman Softy. That might be using footage from the previous one. I'm not sure.
Okay.
There is actually also another. I thought the Thai guys actually might have done an Ultraman TV series as well. I know they tried to do an actual TV series, but I don't know if they actually succeeded or not. Because there's been because of that whole. Yeah, sorry. Go.
I was gonna say, wasn't it the one that they got like halfway through and then they lost the rights?
Well, what happened is the Thai company that had the rights back in the 70s keeps claiming that they have a document from Super I saying that they have the extended rights, basically, for Thailand, for Ultraman stuff.
Right.
And so as an end result, they've tried to do various stuff over the years, most of which has not worked out. Because the Japanese company keeps Super I Productions keeps saying no, you don't. But the problem is Super I isn't with us anymore. It's to say whether he really does or not. There are a couple. There's like Chayo is the name of the Thai company. They have Ultraman Millennium, Dark Ultraman, and Ultraman Elite. And there was even an attempt. They even tried to do one with China, where they were going to actually have a Chinese Ultraman. But they were using the rights from the Thai company, and so Super I Productions gave them a cease and desist order, and okay, here we go. The end result of a whole long fight was basically this: Chayo gained permission to merchandise the original series, but lost the rights to create and market its own Ultraman, or even use the original without Super I consent. It looks like.
Right.
However, wait. Oh, okay. Then in 2000, that happened. Sorry. Then in 2009, the Thai Intellectual Property Court and the Tokyo District Court both ruled in favor of the Thai company. This led the Tokyo District Court on September 30th, 2010, ordering Super I Productions of Japan to pay damages of 16.36 million yen to a Thai gentleman whose name I can't pronounce, of Thailand, for violating his overseas copyrights on Ultraman characters. So I don't know where it's sitting right now. As far as
I bet nobody else does either.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a true mess. It looks like the guy who had the rights, or thought he had the rights in Thailand, basically got paid, but he still doesn't have the rights. Something to that effect.
Yeah, okay.
Because he was claiming to even be co-creator of Ultraman.
Huh.
And so, yeah, there we go. All right.
Right.
Wow. Okay. There's our little marathon. Wow. This is already I think this is already our longest episode to date. It's an hour and 41 minutes already. Yeah. We just marathoned our time. Yep. So we've just gone through. Oh boy.
A brief history
the entire
of the
Ultra series.
Universe.
Exactly. Brief history of the Ultraman universe. We've gone through our brief history of the Ultraman universe and our own personal experiences with Ultraman. So let's just cap this off then. Obviously, I've already stated which one is my favorites. Which ones are your favorites, Don?
Much as I'd like to say the original, I have to say I think Ultra 7 just squeezes it out.
Okay. Why?
Because they had weirder monsters.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm not a complicated guy.
Okay, I can see that. No, you do like the Return of Ultraman too.
Oh, I like them all. Like I mean, I even like Ultra Meow, even though somebody's kind of ignoring that one.
I'm doing my best. Any of the animated ones I don't count. So an Ultra Meow is actually animated, so therefore I don't count it. We just consider that extra. Exactly. Okay. So what do you think the appeal of Ultraman is, Don?
I think a big part of it is it's just the idea of giant monsters fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea that giant monsters are scary. Mm-hmm. We talked in another episode that's kind of part of the Japanese psyche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the idea of a big glowing monster that's on your side is the flip side of that. And that would
awesome.
be appealing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I agree.
Mm.
I can totally see that. Yeah, and of course there's that idea, of course, unlike Superman, who is an alien and everything, but with Ultraman, there's also still that idea that, in theory, anyone could be Ultraman.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, so it has that, I think, that extra level of appeal, where anyone could be Ultraman. And so, yeah, it's kind of like if anyone could become Superman. If they just have to merge with the Superman force or something, which I'm sure DC has done at some point.
Oh, Marvel did.
Marvel did that? Which
Captain
one?
Universe.
Oh, Captain Universe, right? Yeah, you're right. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if Captain Universe might have been somewhat inspired by Ultraman. And Ultraman has been a part of American culture. I mean, there are many things I think that have been influenced by Ultraman over the years in American stuff.
Right.
Little things. Like there's a character called Moonstone. Who's a Marvel character. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
She's like a Marvel character from the 70s. She's a villain, but she's basically an Ultraman. She's like a woman cosplaying as Ultraman, basically.
Except gold instead of red and silver.
But she's even got like the eyes, and she's got the thing on her chest and everything like that. If people are wondering what she looks like, actually there's a current Avengers TV series airing right now. Not Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That was Avengers Assemble, it's called, I think. And in the recent episode, she's been a recurring villain, and I laugh every time I see her. It's had an effect on independent comics. For example, there was Ultra Klutz, going back to our episode with Jeff a couple episodes ago. Jeff didn't mention that, but there was a series called Ultra Klutz, which is basically a pure parody of Ultraman that was done as a black and white indie comic back in the 80s. And I'm sure there have been other influences of Ultraman I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but Ultraman's definitely a character that's had influence, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ultraman actually is one of the most globally well-known superheroes. Like, I bet he's up there.
I definitely think,
the Ultra series have been shown in different countries.
Especially, especially, like, say, the other side of the planet, I think that he's a lot more recognized than maybe in the West.
He's definitely, let's see. So I found a reference here. Ultraman series have been dubbed into many languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, Malay, Mandarin, Indonesian, Cantonese, Filipino, among others. Yeah, there are definitely others that they've been dubbed into as well. And, he's definitely a character that, has some appeal and endurance, and he's has been seen all around the world.
Yep.
And I think that it's a shame in some ways that he's not more recognized in the United States, oddly enough. I mean, he was back in the 70s, but since then I don't think most people would know him except for maybe Ultraman Tiga. And again, most people weren't even aware that was on, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
that was kind of a surprise.
However, and this is not exactly a spoiler, but there's a book called Ready Player One that we mentioned in one of our very early podcasts, and it's being made into a major movie by Spielberg. That's the one about where the guy is basically trying to solve a giant puzzle in an alternate reality world in the future.
Right.
A very rather bleak one. Ultraman, being part of 80s culture, turns up in Ready Player One.
Oh, okay.
Ultraman actually turns up. It turns up in Ready Player One, and I'm praying and hoping that. Actually, I don't think there's a choice. He will be part of the. I think he will be part of the movie. I'm praying that they get the rights because it is awesome the way Ultraman shows up in the book.
Wow. Okay.
So that's something. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing. If that happens, yeah. Let's just say if they do it the way it comes out in the book, prepare for a little bit of a Ultraman awareness / renaissance if that movie is a big hit.
Wow.
Okay, because Ultraman was part of 80s culture, like the dubbed one shown in the United States, and so accordingly, it's a big part of the book.
Right.
And so yeah, you'll see it when the movie comes out. If they get the rights, I'm worried that they're gonna make it like Superman or something, that they'll Americanize it. But I'm praying that they stick with Ultraman, because there's a lot of other Japanese stuff in the book that should be in the movie if they do it right.
Yeah, well, that's the problem too with a big character like that, is you're gonna pay big for the rights to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have to get going. So on that note, I think we've done a pretty good job of giving an overview of Ultraman, and maybe we'll come back to this kind of stuff in the future.
We didn't even get to all the rip-offs.
No, we didn't. And
Spectre-Man.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, that'll be our Tokusatsu TV show episode, which we'll do.
Right.
There's also, of course, the Kamen Rider series, which I'm not as familiar with. Maybe we'll just lump that in with the Tokusatsu stuff. But in a lot of ways, Kamen Rider is the Spider-Man to Ultraman Superman in a lot of ways. That's kind of the way I'd put it.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so they kind of have Japanese kind of have their equivalents. And I think that we'll definitely have to talk about them. Anyway, I'm going to bring this meeting of the Department of Nerdly Affairs to a close. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please tune in next episode when we'll talk about something that you're going to love. Trust us, I promise. And it's not the Star Wars Holiday Special either.
Aw.
Good night, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to hear more or join the conversation, come visit us at obeythedna.com. You can also find us on iTunes or whatever fine podcast site forgot to lock their back door. So until next time, remember that to master the nerdly arts takes time, practice, and enough Coca-Cola to drop a rhino. See ya! Come on over and join the conversation at obeythedna.com, where you will find show notes and more.